Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie vlog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope doing well today. Woo woo woo! We got an NPC news alert, and that is right. Once again, 1 year later, the hashtag Star Wars Rep Matters campaign is still an uplifting part of the Star Wars fandom. Yes, because representation is what the main focus of everyone's lives should be. If you are not constantly focused, if you are not constantly obsessed with race or gender, then you must be a racist or a sexist. That is the mindset. That is the NPC SJW mindset these days, is that if you do not fully embrace every single tenet of this ideology, then you must be the worst person ever. You must be the scum and dregs of society. You must be the worst racist and sexist ever. You want to imprison an entire group of people. You want, oh my god, it's just like the Handmaid's Tale. Oh my gosh, the Handmaid's Tale is so correct. Women have no rights. It's just like the Handmaid's Tale. Really, I didn't realize that women were being forced to reproduce constantly and were being treated in that way. Last time I checked, women have access to the same amount of rights that men do. Now, some people will say, oh, well, what about this one example or this other example? Okay, do examples of prejudice exist? Yes! And unfortunately, because of human nature, it will always be there. Now, does that mean that we need to accept it? Does that mean that we need to, let it go by? No! We need to call it out when it happens. We need to call it out when it actually happens. We need to prosecute when we can. Again, if you are discriminated against because of your gender or your race, guess what? You go to court. If something actually happened for that reason, you go to court. And some people say, oh, you act like it's that easy, it costs a lot of money, all these other things. That might be true. But that pretend like, oh, there's no laws protecting all this. Yes, there are. It is illegal. It is illegal to do those practices. It is illegal to discriminate against anyone for their race and gender. Those laws are already on the books. Now, if you want to say that they might need to be reformed to make it easier for certain things to happen, okay, you can have that discussion. But you notice this, the NPC SJW types, they never want to talk about that. They act like there are no rights. They act like everything is like the 1900s. They act like, oh my goodness, women can't vote and all these other things. Women are being forced to reproduce and all these other things. The Handmaid's Tale. Oh my god, guys, the Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale. It's just like we're back. It's just like we're back. Slavery still exists. It's like, no, it doesn't. Do jack-offs still exist? Yes. Yes, absolutely. There are awful people out there on many political sides who are racist and sexist in real life, people who actually think someone is inferior because of their race or gender. Guess what? That's what racism and sexism actually is. Don't give me this, oh my god, you have a microaggression. Why are you so angry about women and people of color? Why? Your microaggressions are just flourishing right now. It's like, because that microaggression crap is that. It's total crap. It is total nonsense. It is someone who realized, oh, I can do nothing with my career. Oh, let me just make something up so that way I can sell this to a bunch of college students who are going to eat everything that I say, because college students today, for the most part, especially in these big liberal institutions, are complete morons who will believe every single thing that their professor says. And then if anyone ever comes to them saying, hey, what about this side? Hey, what about these facts? What about this reality? Oh, no, I can't take that. I need to go back to my safe space because women are being mistreated everywhere. Every woman is mistreated. Every person of color is mistreated. When you actually look to the reality of the situation, that's just not the case. That's just not the case. Last time I checked, we have several people of all genders in positions of power. We have several people of all different types of color in positions of power. The problem is that when people scream diversity, when people scream Star Wars Rep Matters, in their mind it means the entire film needs to have every single race and every single gender, all 300 genders that there are now, represented on screen. But that's not the point of a movie. The point of Star Wars, the point of any type of entertainment is that it is to be entertaining. If you focus so much more on this concept of over-representation, because that's really what it is, it's not being, when you cast somebody, you want to know what the true racism and sexism is? When you cast somebody just because of their race or their gender, guess what that is? That's racism. That's sexism, because you are making a decision based on that person's race or gender. Let's just call it what it is. If you're going to call people who are critical of the film just because they don't like the story, just because they don't like the identity politics that's being thrown into it, guess what? If that's enough to be called a racist, then it's enough to be called a racist if you're just going to cast people for their race or for their gender. Like, let's just at least call it out in its face. Let's at least be honest. Let's have an honest discussion about that. But the problem is that these NPCs, these SJWs, they don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to engage in dialogue. They would rather, again, hide in the safe space, hide away from everything else around them so that they can just, exist, and they can just choose to live in their ignorance and be blissful, even though it's probably one of the most depressing things to be in because you're constantly angry. You know, people say, oh, you're angry all the time. It's like, well, I'm just passionate. Honestly, I make these videos and I read the articles and I'm just like, okay, yeah. These are people who have no idea what they're talking about. These are people who again, just live in that safe space. So why should it really bother me that much? Now, does it upset me? Do I think it's really sad and depressing? Kind of. The fact that there are a lot of people out there that just, again, they put themselves into their own blocks. They put themselves into, basically, they confine themselves. If anyone is going to be holding anyone back, it's anyone that tries to say race and gender are all that matter. Anyone that tries to limit a person and who a person is by their race or gender or sexual orientation, and that is the defining principle of that person, that is when you isolate yourself from everything else around you. Because human beings are complex. We have many different likes. We have many different parts of ourselves. And if we just try and limit ourselves to just one or two of those things, guess what? It's going to make a lot of sense when we are just totally, separated from most of society. It makes total sense when you put it in that way and when you put it in that context. But again, 1 year later, Star Wars #StarWarsMatters campaign is still an uplifting part of the fandom. And then, of course, we always got to get to that first paragraph because they always love to throw those jabs out there. As you may have heard, things haven't been too great in Star Wars fandom lately. Really. I don't think it's Star Wars fandom. I think it's Star Wars in general because they have decided to play identity politics, and most people don't care about that nonsense. While all fandoms, or even groups of people in general, attract bigotry and unsavory people, Star Wars has taken the cake, especially after the release of The Last Jedi. Yes, because people who are critical of this film, the loudest critics on this film, geeks and gamers, world-class BSers, Ethan Van Sciver, Anna that Star Wars girl, Ivan Ortega, all these people are just a bunch of white racists. Oh, wait a minute. They're not all white. And wait, they're not all male either. I guess that kind of throws all that nonsense. And again, these are the loudest people. There are so many voices. And part of my community, there are people of all different kinds of backgrounds from all different countries who think the same thing. We disagree on a lot of things, but guess what? There's one thing that we agree on, and that is that Star Wars is going down the drain. That Star Wars is going in the toilet. And guess what? We have more diversity on our side. It's interesting that a lot of the time when you hear about this NPC nonsense, when you hear these NPCs just going off, it's interesting that most of them are college-educated white men and women. It's interesting that that is usually the background of those people. It's fascinating that when you go into, I guess, the dregs of society, the lower parts of society, you see the most diversity. You want to know why? It's because we don't care and we don't preach diversity of gender and of racial background, because those are not the primary thing. In fact, I would say the most important thing for anyone is thought. What do you think? Where are you coming from? How were you raised? What culture are you coming from? Diversity of thought is probably the most important types of diversity to exist, because when you exclude diversity of thought, which we see in a lot of NPC SJW, especially in Hollywood, when you see a lack of diversity of thought, what you end up having is the same tone over and over and over again, and people not only putting themselves into these safe spaces and shutting themselves off, but then you have these huge celebrities like Jimmy Kimmel and all these other people who are preaching this nonsense. Acting like because they're famous, because they're in Hollywood, oh, I know better than everyone else, and because I have a platform, I'm going to use it to just spout off stupidity. And when you keep having that, guess what? You're creating more and more and more idiotic personas, because there is no diversity of thought. Phantom Menace? Oh, there's a ton of, the one singular issue that keeps us mostly together is our hatred for the direction of Star Wars. However, if you were to ask any single one of us a myriad of questions, you would find out that we disagree on a lot of things. I mean, I've gotten into discussions on my live streams with people who disagree with me on a lot of things. Whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's other movies. I mean, because I review other movies on this channel. I mean, obviously I have a passion for Star Wars, and so I talk about Star Wars a lot on this channel, but we talk about other things, and we don't always agree. And that's what the beauty of this movement is that we don't always agree. We're not all the same person. But again, when you try and limit yourself by your race, gender, orientation, anything, you limit yourself, you isolate yourself, and that's probably the biggest problem with our culture in today's society. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Hashtag Star Wars rep matters, guys. Representation matters. Not telling a good story. Not creating a strong character of various backgrounds, but no, just representation itself. And that's the biggest issue, is that representation for the sake of representation is nothing more than racism and sexism. Again, when you're just making choices because you want to have a woman or a person of color on screen and that is your sole motive, I'm sorry, you're making decisions. based solely on race and gender. How is that not? How is that not? And yet me just being critical of a film because it's poor and because you have just this forced diversity, because guess what? When you focus on that, it's like what happened with Jessica Jones season 2, Star Wars episode 8, with The Last Jedi. You focus so much on trying to get all the representation out there. You focus so much on that you let the story, you let the plot, you let the character arcs just go and die. And that's the biggest problem that we have today. But guys, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you agree with me that just when you isolate yourself into these very tight-knit groups, you end up just isolating yourself from others? And I think that at this point, especially not only in the United States, but around the world, we need to start having dialogue. We need to start engaging in different ideas. But once we just hide away from everything else and call and cry racist and sexist every time someone disagrees with us, that's going to be a problem. And diversity of thought is how we move forward, not by embracing Star Wars representation. Again, if anything needs to be represented in Star Wars right now, it's diversity of thought. But guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You are all amazing and beautiful people. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. And as always, God bless.